Josie was 12 years old when she found her mama's shoes by the frozen creek. The laces were still tied. The leather was still warm, but Mama was gone. And on the left shoe, a dark smear of blood. She had 4 siblings to protect. A baby sister who stopped crying an hour ago. And a blizzard that wanted to kill them all. So she did the only thing she could do. She picked up those bloody shoes. And she walked. What she found at the end of that walk would change everything. Not just for her family, but for a broken rancher who had stopped believing in second chances. This is a story about the real meaning of home. It is not the walls around you. It is not the roof over your head. Home is the people whose shoes sit beside yours at the end of the day. Home is found family. It is forgiveness. It is the courage to love again after losing everything. If you have ever felt lost, if you have ever wondered if life could get better, this story is for you. Comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. If you believe in second chances, hit that subscribe button. And if this story touches your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Now settle in. Get comfortable. This is going to be one heck of a ride. Josie could not feel her feet anymore. She had stopped feeling them somewhere around the 3rd hour, maybe the 4th. Time had become meaningless out here in the white nothing. All she knew was the weight of her baby sister pressed against her chest and the desperate need to keep moving. One step, then another, then another. Behind her, she could hear Sam struggling through the drifts. He was dragging Violet by the hand. The 7-year-old had stopped crying an hour ago. That worried Josie almost as much as the cold. Rose had not spoken since they left the camp. Her little sister had gone to what Mama called her hiding place, that space inside her head where nothing bad could reach. Josie wished she had a hiding place like that. Instead, she had only this, the relentless push forward through snow that reached her knees. The baby had stopped crying too. That was the worst part. Little Lily had screamed herself hoarse when they first set out. Then she had whimpered. Then she had gone quiet. Now she lay still against Josie's chest beneath her coat, still breathing. Josie checked every few minutes to make sure. Still breathing. But so cold, so terribly cold. Josie did not know exactly when everything went wrong. 3 hours ago, she had woken in their camp to find Mama's bedroll empty. At first, she thought nothing of it. Mama sometimes rose early to check on things to make sure they were safe, but Mama's coat was still there. Her bag was still there. Everything was still there. Everything except Mama. Josie had crept out of the tent. The snow had stopped falling sometime in the night. The world lay white and silent under a sky just beginning to turn gray with dawn. She followed the tracks, Mama's tracks. They led to the creek, and there she found them, Mama's shoes. They sat side by side on a flat rock near the water, laces still tied, placed there careful and deliberate, like someone wanted them to be found. And on the left shoe, she saw it. A dark smear against the worn leather. Blood. Josie touched it with trembling fingers. Still tacky. Still wet. She did not scream. She wanted to. God, how she wanted to. But she had learned long ago that screaming did not help. Screaming did not save anyone. Only action saved people. She went back to the camp. She woke Sam. She said only 4 words. "We have to go now," Sam had argued. Where was Mama? What had happened? They should wait. They should look for her. But Josie had seen something in those carefully placed shoes, something that told her waiting was not an option. Someone had taken Mama, and whoever it was might come back for the rest of them. So they ran. Now here she was, 12 years old, carrying her baby sister through a blizzard, leading her siblings toward she knew not what. Behind her, Sam had fallen again. She heard the soft thump of his body hitting the snow. She did not stop. She could not stop. If she stopped, they would all die. One step, then another, then another. The light appeared so suddenly she thought at first she was seeing things. A single lamp burning in a window, A farmhouse, impossibly far across the white expanse, but there, real. A chance. Josie fixed her eyes on that light and walked. The fence appeared out of the snow like a miracle. Wooden posts. A gate. Signs of civilization. Signs of life. Her legs gave out. She collapsed against the fence post. Her knees hit the frozen ground and she felt nothing. Her whole body had gone numb. Only the weight of Lily against her chest reminded her she was still alive. A figure emerged from the barn. A man, tall, broad-shouldered. He stopped when he saw her, just stood there staring. Josie tried to call out. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Please." The man did not move. "Mister, please." Still nothing. Just that frozen stare. Josie gathered every last bit of strength she had left. She screamed. "I found Mama's shoes by the creek, but Mama was not there. Please, mister. My sister is dying." The man stood frozen for 3 eternal seconds. Then he ran, but not toward her. He ran to the house. Josie's heart stopped. He was going inside. He was going to lock the door. He was going to leave them to die out here just like everyone else had left them, just like Papa had left them, just like Mama had been taken from them. The door banged open. The man emerged with blankets, a rifle, a look on his face that Josie did not understand. He was running toward them now, running like death itself was chasing him. He reached them and dropped to his knees in front of her. Up close she could see his face, weather-worn, hard-lined, eyes that looked like they had seen too much and wanted to see no more. His gaze locked onto the shoes she was still clutching. Mama's shoes, the blood-stained shoes she could not leave behind. His face changed. Recognition, horror, something worse. He knew something. Josie could see it plain as day. This stranger knew what had happened to Mama. "Give me the baby." His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. "Give her to me now." Josie hesitated. She had carried Lily all this way, protected her, kept her alive through sheer force of will. "I am trying to save her life." Something in his voice broke through her resistance. She let him take the baby. The man ripped open his coat. He pressed Lily against his bare chest, wrapped his coat around them both, his face twisted with something that looked like pain. "Get the others." He nodded toward Sam and the girls who had finally caught up. Sam stood there swaying on his feet. Violet clung to his hand, crying silently. Rose stared at nothing. "Get them inside! That house! Go!" Josie tried to stand. Her legs would not cooperate. The man reached out with his free arm and hauled her up. "Lean on me. We are almost there." They stumbled toward the house together. The warmth hit Josie like a physical force when they crossed the threshold. She nearly collapsed again from the sheer relief of it. The man was already moving, barking orders. "Fire! Build it up! All the wood you can find!" Sam snapped into action. He grabbed wood from the pile by the hearth and began feeding the flames. "Blankets, that chest there. Get them." Josie found the strength to move. She pulled blankets from the chest and wrapped them around Violet and Rose. Her little sisters huddled together on the floor near the fire, shaking, but alive. The man knelt by the hearth with Lily still pressed against his chest. He was rubbing her back, her arms, her tiny legs, trying to force the blood to move. "Come on, little one. Come on. Do not you quit on me." Josie watched him, watched the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes went distant for just a moment, like he was somewhere else, someone else. "Is she going to die?" The man did not answer. "Is she going to die?" His eyes snapped back to the present. He looked at Josie, really looked at her, and she saw something in his gaze that surprised her. Respect. She is alive. That is what matters right now. The baby stirred. A tiny sound escaped her lips. Then she started to cry. That thin, reedy wail was the most beautiful sound Josie had ever heard. She burst into tears herself, could not help it. The relief was too much to contain. "She is fighting." The man's voice was gruff. That is good. She needs milk, warm milk. There is a pail in the kitchen. Josie ran. When she came back with the warmed milk, the man helped her feed it to Lily. The baby drank greedily. Milk spilled down her chin, but she drank. Good girl, Josie whispered. Good girl, Lily. Drink it all. The man watched them, his face unreadable. What is your name? Josephine. Everyone calls me Josie. How old are you, Josie? 12? Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. You did good, getting them here. Josie felt her face crumple. All the fear and exhaustion and desperate hope came rushing out. I did not know where else to go. We walked all night. I just kept walking toward the lights. I thought if we stopped, we would die. You were right. She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. You believe me about Mama. It was not a question, but he answered anyway. Tell me what happened, Josie told him. About the camp, about waking to find Mama gone, about the shoes by the creek, about the blood, and about the man who had visited their camp the night before. Tall, thin, a scar running down his left cheek, and a smile that never reached his eyes. The stranger's face went pale. This man. Did he say anything else? Did he touch your Mama? No. Mama told him to move along. He did. But he kept looking back. At her. At us. Like he was counting us. The stranger stood abruptly. He handed Lily to Josie and crossed to the window, stared out at the snow for a long moment. What is your name, mister? Silas. Silas Thornton. Josie filed the name away. You know who took her, do you not? Silas did not turn around. Maybe. Tell me. Finally he faced her. His eyes were hard, determined, haunted. I need to know more first. But I will find her. I promise you that. Josie had learned not to trust promises. Papa had promised to take care of them. Uncle Victor had promised to help. Every adult in her life had promised and failed. But something in this man's voice made her want to believe. Why would you help us? You do not know us. Silas was quiet for the long moment. Because those shoes you found, the way they were placed, I have seen that before. I know what it means. What does it mean? It means your Mama is still alive, for now, and you know how to find her. Yes, then find her. Please, Mr. Thornton, find her and bring her back. Silas looked at her. At this girl who had carried her baby sister through a blizzard and refused to give up, who had kept 4 children alive through sheer determination, who was now trusting him with the most important thing in her world. I will. He walked to the closet and pulled out a rifle that looked like it had not been touched in years. He checked the chamber, loaded it. Josie watched him with those sharp eyes. What are you going to do? Find your Mama and the men who took her. Silas did not answer. He did not know the answer himself. Silas moved on autopilot. He had done this before, 5 years ago, holding a child against his chest, praying for a miracle. It did not work then. His daughter Hannah had been 8 years old, burning with fever, her small body convulsing in his arms while Eleanor screamed at him to do something, anything, for the love of God, anything. But there was nothing to do. The doctor was 2 hours away, the fever was too strong, and Silas was just a man, just a broken, worthless man who could not save the one person who mattered most. Hannah died in his arms. Eleanor blamed him, said he should have gotten the doctor sooner, said he should have seen the signs, said a real father would have found a way. 6 months later, Eleanor walked into the creek behind their ranch, walked in and did not walk out. Silas found her body the next morning. He buried them both under the oak tree behind the barn, put up 2 wooden crosses, carved their names with his own hands. Then he went inside and did not come out for 3 days. When he finally emerged, he made a vow. No more killing. He had been a bounty hunter before. A good one. He tracked men across 3 territories, brought them back alive when he could, dead when he had to. It was honest work, or so he told himself. Then came Daniel Crane, 22 years old, wanted for robbery in 3 counties. The poster said he was dangerous, armed, had killed a deputy during his escape. Silas tracked him for 2 weeks, found him making camp near the river, called out for him to surrender. The boy ran. Silas chased. Daniel's horse stumbled on loose rock, threw him. The boy hit the ground at a bad angle. His neck snapped like a dry branch. Silas stood over the body, looked at that young face, those wide, dead eyes. And then the truth came out. The wanted poster was a lie. Daniel Crane had not robbed anyone, had not killed any deputy. He was innocent, framed by the actual thief who wanted someone else to take the blame. Silas had killed an innocent man. He tried to find the boy's family, to apologize, to make amends. He found only a brother, only a Emmett Crane. A man with eyes full of hatred so pure it was almost holy. "You took everything from me," Emmett had said. "Someday I will take everything from you." Silas quit bounty hunting that day, moved to this ranch, tried to build a new life with Eleanor and Hannah, and then he lost them too. Now here he was, holding another dying child, feeling that same helpless rage building in his chest. His hands stopped moving. His vision tunneled. He was not in the present anymore. He was back in that cabin, holding Hannah, watching her eyes go glassy, feeling the exact moment her chest stopped rising. "Mister?" A voice from far away. "Mister." Closer now. "She is not breathing right." "Do something," Silas snapped back. The girl, Josie, was gripping his arm, shaking him, her face inches from his. The baby in his arms was not Hannah. This child was alive. This child could still be saved. He forced his hands to move again, rubbing warmth into cold skin, willing the blood to flow. And slowly, miracle of miracles, color returned to the baby's cheeks. Silas let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. The children gathered around the fire, 5 of them in total, Josie the oldest, then the boy Sam, then 2 younger girls, Violet and Rose, and the baby Lily, who now slept in a basket by the hearth. They looked like refugees from a war, which Silas supposed they were, their own private war against winter and whoever had taken their mother. The younger children fell asleep eventually, exhaustion claiming them one by one. But Josie stayed awake, watching Silas with those sharp, knowing eyes. She reminded him of someone, himself maybe, back before the world beat the hope out of him. "You knew," she said quietly. "When you saw Mama's shoes, you knew something." Silas considered lying, decided against it. "I recognized the way they were placed, side by side, laces tied, like someone wanted them found." "Who does that?" Silas did not answer. "You know who took her, do you not?" He met her eyes. This girl who had carried her baby sister through a blizzard, who had kept 4 children alive when grown men would have failed. "Maybe. I need to know more first. The man who came to your camp. Tell me about him." Josie described him. Tall, thin, a scar running down his left cheek, a smile that never reached his eyes. Silas felt his blood turn to ice. Emmett Crane, after all these years, after all this time. Here he was. Silas stood and walked to the closet. His guns hung on the wall, untouched for 5 years, covered in dust. He pulled down the rifle, the revolver. The weight of them felt wrong in his hands, like holding pieces of a man he used to be, a man he never wanted to be again. But Emmett Crane had taken a woman, a mother of 5 children, and Silas knew exactly what Emmett did with the women he took, knew where they ended up, what happened to them. He loaded the rifle. "What are you going to do?" Josie's voice came from behind him. "Find your mama and the men who took her." Silas turned to face her. He owed her the truth, or at least part of it. "There is a man named Emmett Crane. He runs an operation through these mountains, taking women, selling them to places down south, bad places. Josie's face went pale, but she did not look away. He took my mama. I believe so. Why? Silas hesitated. How much could he tell her? How much should he tell her? Because I killed his brother 7 years ago. It was a mistake. The boy was innocent. I did not know until after, but that does not change what I did. He wants revenge. He wants something. Revenge, maybe, or something worse. Josie absorbed this. Her jaw tightened. So, my mama got taken because of you. The words hit like a physical blow. Yes, maybe. I do not know for certain. She stared at him for a long moment. He expected anger, hatred, the same look Eleanor used to give him. Instead, Josie nodded slowly. Then you owe us. You owe us my mama back. Silas felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the wall he had built around his heart. I know. He walked to the kitchen table, spread out a map of the territory, started marking locations. Crane operates out of Miller's Canyon. There is a cave network there. Natural hiding spots, hard to reach, easy to defend. You know where he is. I know where he will take her. Then, what are we waiting for? Silas looked at her. We are not waiting for anything. I am going. You are staying here. With your brothers and sisters. Josie's eyes flashed. She is my mama, and those are your siblings. They need you. What happens to them if you go running off into the mountains and do not come back? Josie opened her mouth to argue, closed it. He could see her mind working, calculating. Finally, she nodded. Fine. But I am not just going to sit here and wait. You are going to protect this house. Silas handed her a revolver. It was smaller than the rifle, easier for her to handle. Anyone comes through that door without saying the word bluebird first, you shoot. Understand? What if it is you and you forget? Then you shoot me and apologize later. Something flickered across her face. Not trust, not yet. But maybe the beginning of respect. Silas gathered his supplies, ammunition, water, dried meat. He did not know how long this would take. Did not know what he would find in that canyon. He did know one thing. Emmett Crane had been waiting for this moment for 7 years, planning it, savoring it. Whatever trap he had laid would be perfect. Silas would walk into it anyway. Because that woman out there, that mother of 5 children, she did not deserve what was happening to her, and her children did not deserve to lose her. And because maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to finally do something right. He saddled Copper, his horse, his only real companion for 5 years. The animal nickered softly as Silas tightened the straps. I know, boy. Been a while since we went anywhere. Josie followed him out to the barn. How long will you be gone? I do not know. A day, maybe. Maybe longer. And if you do not come back, then you take your brothers and sisters and you ride to town. Coldwater Springs, 10 miles east. Find Sheriff Barkley. Tell him everything. She nodded. Silas mounted up, looked down at this girl who was carrying the weight of the world on her small shoulders. You did good, Josie. Getting them here. Your mama would be proud. Just bring her back. I will do everything I can. He rode out into the snow. Behind him the ranch grew smaller, the light in the window dimmer. Ahead of him lay the mountains, the canyon, and a man who had been waiting 7 years for revenge. Silas Thornton had not killed anyone in 5 years. He had a feeling that was about to change. The canyon opened before Silas like a wound in the earth. Red rock walls rose on either side of him, ancient and implacable, carved by 1,000,000 years of water and wind into shapes that seemed almost alive in the early morning light. Miller's Canyon. He had been here before, years ago, tracking a man wanted for murder across 3 counties. The canyon was a natural fortress, one way in, one way out. Unless you knew the secret paths that wound through the rock. Silas knew them. He urged Copper forward slowly, eyes scanning every shadow, every crevice, every place a man might hide with a rifle. The snow had covered most of the tracks, but Silas could read the land the way other men read books. Here, a branch broken at shoulder height. There, disturbed snow where something heavy had been dragged. And there, small drops of red frozen into pink crystals against white stone. Blood. Emmeline had fought. The signs were everywhere. Claw marks on a tree trunk where she had grabbed on and been pulled away. A torn piece of fabric caught on a thorn bush. A man's boot print smeared with blood that was not his. Good for you, Silas thought. Keep fighting. He followed the trail deeper into the canyon. The walls grew higher. The shadows grew longer. The temperature dropped. Something was wrong. He felt it before he saw it. That prickle at the back of his neck that had saved his life more times than he could count. He reined Copper to a stop. Listened. Wind through rock. The distant call of a hawk. Nothing else. But the feeling would not go away. He dismounted and tied Copper to a stunted juniper. Drew his rifle. Moved forward on foot. The body appeared around the next bend. A man lying against a boulder. Not dead. Not quite. His hands pressed against his gut where something dark and wet was soaking through his shirt. Silas approached cautiously. Rifle ready. The man looked up. His face was gray with pain, his eyes unfocused. Water. Please. Water. Silas crouched beside him, close enough to see the wound now. A sharpened branch protruding from the man's belly, crude but effective. But Emmeline's work had to be. Tell me where Crane took her. Water, please, tell me where and I will give you water. The man's eyes focused slightly, found Silas's face. The cave, half-mile. North Fork. How many men? 4. 5. The man coughed. Blood bubbled between his lips. Don't matter. You ain't getting her out. Why not? The man laughed. A wet, horrible sound. Crane don't want to sell her. He wants you, Thornton. The woman's just bait. So Crane knew he would come. Of course he did. Emmett Crane had spent 7 years planning this moment. How does he know about me? He knows everything. Been tracking you for years, knows about your wife, your daughter. The man's voice was fading. Knows you stopped killing. That's why he wanted you. To prove you haven't changed. To prove you're still the monster who killed his brother. Silas stood. The dying man's words echoed in his skull. Monster. That was what Emmett thought he was. What Eleanor had thought at the end. What he sometimes thought himself in the dark hours before dawn. Maybe they were all right. Water. The man begged. You promised. Silas looked down at him. This man who worked for Crane, who helped kidnap women and sell them to slavery, who would have done the same to Emmeline if she had not fought back. I did not promise anything. He walked away. The man called after him. Thornton, Thornton, you can't save her. Crane'll make you choose. Her life or your soul. You can't have both. Silas kept walking, deeper into the canyon, deeper into the trap he knew was waiting. The North Fork appeared after another quarter-mile. The canyon split here, one branch continuing west toward the mountains, the other curving north into a narrow defile barely wide enough for 2 men to walk abreast. Silas took the North Fork. The walls closed in around him. The sky became a thin strip of gray far above. He moved slowly, checking every shadow, every crack in the rock. The cave entrance appeared suddenly, a dark mouth in the canyon wall, big enough to walk into without stooping, deep enough that the light did not reach the back. Silas stopped, listened. Voices, faint but distinct, coming from inside. He pressed himself against the rock wall and edged closer, peered around the corner of the entrance. Firelight flickered on the walls. 3 men that he could see, sitting around a small fire, playing cards, rifles propped against the stone beside them. And there, against the back wall, a woman. She sat with her hands bound in front of her, dark hair falling around a pale face, eyes that glittered with reflected firelight. She was alive. Silas felt something loosen in his chest. He had not realized how tight it had been until that moment. Now, how to get her out? 3 men visible. The dying man had said 4 or 5, so at least one more somewhere. Maybe watching the entrance. Maybe deeper in the cave. And Crane himself. Where was Crane? Where was... As if summoned by the thought, a voice spoke from behind him. "Silas Thornton, you look old." Silas spun. Rifle coming up. Emmett Crane stood 10 feet away. He had emerged from somewhere in the rock, some hidden passage that Silas had not seen. He held no weapon. His hands hung loose at his sides. "Emmett, you look worse." And it was true. 7 years had not been kind to Emmett Crane. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. The scar that ran down his cheek seemed deeper than Silas remembered. They faced each other across the frozen ground. Neither moved. "You know why you're here," Crane said. "It was not a question. I know you have a woman who does not belong to you. She's bait." "I thought that was obvious." Crane tilted his head. "You came anyway. Why?" "Because those children deserve their mother." Something flickered in Crane's eyes. Pain, maybe, or memory. "And you. What do you deserve?" "I do not know." Crane stepped closer. "Do you deserve peace, Silas? Do you deserve forgiveness? Do you deserve to pretend you're not a killer?" "I never pretended anything. You pretend every day." Crane's voice hardened. "Every day you don't pick up a gun. Every day you play the hermit instead of admitting what you really are." He stepped closer still. "You killed my brother." "I know. He was innocent. I know. He was 22 years old. He was going to be a school teacher. Had his whole life ahead of him. And you ended it based on a piece of paper with lies written on it." Silas did not defend himself. Could not defend himself. Every word was true. "I have spent 7 years thinking about this moment," Crane continued. 7 years imagining what I would do when I finally had you. And you know what I realized. What? Killing you is not enough. That would be too easy. Too quick. Then what do you want? Crane's eyes burned with something cold and terrible. "I want you to prove me right. I want you to pick up that rifle and do what you have always done. I want you to kill to save her, and in doing so, prove that you never changed. That redemption is a fairy tale, that you are exactly the monster you have always been, and if I don't, then she dies, slowly, and you get to live with another death on your conscience." Crane spread his hands. "Choice is yours, Silas. Kill me and prove me right, or let her die and prove me right anyway. Either way, I win." Silas stood very still. His finger rested on the trigger of his rifle. He could end this now. One squeeze, one bullet. Emmett Crane would be dead before he hit the ground. But that was exactly what Crane wanted, and Silas refused to give it to him. 24 hours, Crane said when Silas did not move. "Come back tomorrow. Bring your guns. Make your choice." He smiled that dead-eyed smile. "I will be waiting." He melted back into the shadows, leaving Silas alone with the wind and the weight of impossible choices. Silas stood there for a long time. The cold seeped into his bones. His mind churned. He could not save Emmeline alone. Not against 5 men in a fortified position. Not without becoming the killer Crane believed him to be. He needed a plan. He needed help. He needed something other than walking into that cave with guns blazing. For the first time in 5 years, he wished he was not alone. He walked back to where Copper waited, mounted up, turned the horse toward home. Behind him, the canyon held its secrets. The woman waited in the dark. And Emmett Crane prepared his trap. Tomorrow, everything would change. Silas just did not know how yet. Emmeline Holloway had been a captive for almost 3 days now. She had stopped being afraid somewhere around the second day. Fear was useless. Fear got you killed. She had learned that lesson years ago on a parlor floor with blood on her hands and a dead husband at her feet. Now she was calculating. 4 men besides Crane. 2 rifles, 3 pistols visible. The cave had one entrance that she could see. Crane was the leader. The others followed without question, except for one. His name was Billy, 19 years old if he was a day. He flinched every time Crane talked about selling women. He would not meet Emmeline's eyes. Guilt hung around him like a cloak. He was the weak link. Emmeline had been working on him for 2 days now. Nothing obvious, just a look here and there. A soft word when the others were not listening, playing on that guilt, nurturing it. Today she would push harder. The fire crackled in the center of the cave. The other men played cards and drank whiskey they had brought from some raid. Crane paced near the entrance, waiting for something. Emmeline had figured out what he was waiting for. This man, Thornton, the one who lived in the ranch where her children had found shelter. She did not know the history between them, did not know why Crane hated him so much, but she knew one thing. Crane was using her as bait. That meant she had value. That meant Crane would not kill her. Not yet, not until Thornton came, which gave her time. Billy walked past her carrying firewood. She caught his sleeve. He froze, looked down at her with those guilty eyes. Please. Her voice was soft. My hands. The ropes are so tight. Could you loosen them? Just a little. Billy glanced toward the other men. They were absorbed in their card game. Crane had his back turned. I can't. You could, if you wanted to. Emmeline held his gaze. You are not like them. I can see it. You do not want to be here. It does not matter what I want. It always matters. She let a tear slide down her cheek. It was not hard to summon. She had enough grief stored up to cry forever. I have 5 children. 5. The youngest is barely 18 months old. They are out there somewhere, alone, scared. Billy's face twisted. Please, just loosen the ropes. That is all I ask. He hesitated, looked at the other men again, at Crane, then back at Emmeline. Quick, before anyone sees. He knelt beside her. His fingers fumbled at the knots, loosening them. Not enough to slip free, but enough that the blood began to flow back into her hands. Thank you, she breathed. Thank you. You are a good man. I am not a good man. His voice was bitter. I would not be here if I was a good man. You can change. It is never too late to change. Billy shook his head, but something shifted in his eyes, a crack in the wall. Emmeline filed it away for later. Crane's voice cut through the cave. He came. Everyone stopped, looked toward the entrance. Thornton. He came to the canyon, just like I knew he would. One of the men stood. You want us to grab him? No. Crane's smile made Emmeline's skin crawl. Not yet. Let him come. Let him see her. Let him understand what is at stake. Then we will have our fun. He walked over to where Emmeline sat, crouched before her. Your children. Did you know they found shelter with Silas Thornton? Emmeline kept her face blank, did not show the relief that flooded through her at the news that her babies were alive. I don't know anyone named Thornton. He is an interesting man. Crane's eyes glittered. A former bounty hunter. Very good at his job. He killed my brother 7 years ago. Did it without hesitation, based on nothing but a wanted poster full of lies. Emmeline said nothing. The thing about Thornton is he quit. After he found out my brother was innocent, he quit killing, swore he would never do it again. Crane laughed softly. He actually believes he can change, can wash away all that blood with good intentions and solitude. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand what is happening here. Crane leaned closer. You are not the target, Mrs. Holloway. You are the weapon. When Thornton comes for you, and he will come, he will have to choose. Kill to save you, or let you die. And either way, you win. Crane's smile widened. You are smarter than you look. He stood and walked away, leaving Emmeline alone with her thoughts. So this was about revenge, not money, not slavery, just one man's need to destroy another. She could work with that. The night passed slowly. The men took turns sleeping. Crane never seemed to rest. He paced the cave like a caged animal, waiting, planning. Emmeline waited too, working at the loosened ropes whenever no one was watching, making them looser still, not enough to slip free, not yet, but almost. Billy brought her water in the small hours before dawn. His eyes were haunted. Why did you join them? She asked quietly. I was starving. He would not meet her gaze. After the war, there was nothing. No work, no food. Crane offered me money for hurting women. I never hurt anyone. His voice cracked. I just watch. I just stand guard. I never touch them. But you let it happen. What choice do I have? Emmeline looked at him, really looked at him, saw the boy beneath the man, the fear beneath the guilt. There is always a choice, she said. I know. I have made choices I am not proud of, things that haunt me. But I made them to protect my children. I made them for love. She paused. What did you make yours for? Billy had no answer. Tomorrow or the next day? Thornton will come. When he does, there will be chaos. Blood. You could slip away. No one would notice. Or you could help me. Help you how? Untie me. When the shooting starts, just untie me and walk away. Billy shook his head. They would kill me. They might kill you anyway. Do you think Crane lets people just leave? Do you think any of these men will be around to collect their payment? She let that sink in. He is using all of you, just like he is using me. And when he is done, there will be no witnesses. That is not true. Look at his eyes. Look at how he watches his own men. Does that look like a man who plans to share anything? Billy looked, and Emmeline saw the doubt creep across his face. Think about it. That is all I ask. Just think about it. She settled back against the rock and closed her eyes, pretended to sleep, but her mind was racing, planning, preparing. Thornton was coming. When he did, Emmeline would be ready. She was done being a victim. Done waiting for someone to save her. Her children needed her, and Emmeline Holloway would burn the world down to get back to them. Silas returned to the ranch as the sun was setting. He had expected to find the children huddled by the fire, scared but safe. What he found instead made his blood run cold. A strange horse tied at his fence. He dismounted slowly, drew his rifle, scanned the windows. The front door stood open. Lamplight spilled out into the gathering dark. He eased onto the porch, rifle ready, and stopped. Victor Holloway sat at Silas's kitchen table, eating dinner with the children. Violet was chattering about the barn cat. Rose sat in silence, but her eyes were tracking every movement. Sam ate with forced enthusiasm. Baby Lily slept in a basket by the fire, and Josie stood in the corner, rigid as a fence post, the revolver Silas had given her hidden behind her back. Mr. Thornton. Victor rose with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He was a handsome man, well-dressed, clean-shaven, nothing like the monster Silas had expected. I hope you do not mind. When I arrived and found my nieces and nephew here alone, I thought the Christian thing to do was keep them company until their host returned. Silas stepped inside. He did not lower the rifle. Who are you? Victor Holloway. I am these children's uncle. I have been searching for them and their mother for nearly 3 months. His voice was warm, concerned. Perfect. Josie's eyes met Silas's. One tiny shake of her head. Do not trust him. You can imagine my relief when I heard they had found shelter with a good man. How did you hear? Word travels. Victor's smile did not waver. I have been asking about a woman with 5 children throughout the territory. Eventually, someone remembered seeing them. Silas studied the man, looking for cracks in the mask, finding none. The children's mother is missing. Yes, I heard. Very troubling. As their closest male relative, I have certain responsibilities. Legal responsibilities. Their mother will be back soon. Will she? Victor's mask slipped. Just slightly. You seem very confident for a man who does not know where she is. I know exactly where she is. And I'm going to get her. Alone. Against however many men are holding her. Victor shook his head. That sounds like a suicide mission, Mr. Thornton. And if you die, these children will be orphans. As their uncle, I would be obligated to step in. There it was, the threat beneath the smile. Silas kept his face blank, but inside his mind was racing. This man had tracked Emmeline across 3 months and hundreds of miles. That took resources, connections, and a kind of obsession that went beyond family concern. The younger children should be in bed, Silas said. Josie, take your brothers and sisters to the back room. Josie hesitated. Now. She gathered the children and herded them toward the back of the house. Violet protested. Sam looked like he wanted to argue. But Josie's face brooked no disagreement. When they were gone, Victor dropped his pretense. Let us be direct, Mr. Thornton. Let's. Emmeline is a wanted woman. She killed my brother, her own husband. I have evidence to prove it. Witnesses. Physical evidence. Enough to hang her. Silas went very still. Then why have you not gone to the law? Because I am a reasonable man. Victor smiled again. That same smile that never reached his eyes. I do not want Emmeline dead. I want her cooperative. I want those children under my roof. I want the land Thomas left behind. And I want everyone to behave like a proper family. And if she refuses, then I have no choice but to do my civic duty and report a murderer to the authorities. Victor straightened his coat. But we are not there yet. First, let us see if you actually managed to bring her back alive. Silas understood now what this man was, what he wanted. Emmeline had not run from grief. She had run from this. From Victor Holloway and his reasonable smile and his legal threats and whatever he had done to make her flee in the middle of the night with 5 children and nothing but the clothes on their backs. What happened to Thomas Holloway? Victor's face flickered. A mining accident. Tragic, really. And yet you have evidence that Emmeline killed him. I have questions. Victor's voice hardened. Questions about that night, about what really happened. Questions I intend to have answered. Silas considered his options. He could kill this man right now, put a bullet in him and bury the body where no one would ever find it. It would solve one problem, but it would create others. And Silas had promised himself no more killing. Get out of my house, Victor laughed. I do not think you understand your position, Mr. Thornton. I could ride to town right now, tell the sheriff you are harboring the children of a murderess, complicate your life in ways you cannot imagine. Try it. See what happens. They stared at each other. Victor blinked first. You have until tomorrow night. If Emmeline is not back by then, alive or dead, I am taking those children, legally, properly, and there will not be a thing you can do to stop me. He moved toward the door. Stopped. Actually, I have a better idea. Let me come with you tomorrow. To rescue Emmeline. Why would you want that? Victor's mask dropped completely. Because I want to make sure she does not come back. Silas understood instantly. If Emmeline died during the rescue, Victor got everything. The children, the land, without the complication of a living woman who might fight back. No. Think carefully. I could make things very difficult for you. The answer is no. Now get out before I decide to make things difficult for you. Victor held his gaze for a long moment. Then he smiled that dead-eyed smile and walked out into the night. Silas listened to him mount up. Ride away. The hoofbeats faded into silence. Josie appeared at his side. He is going to kill Mama, is he not? If he gets the chance, he is going to try. Then we cannot let him. Silas looked at her. 12 years old, carrying a gun, ready to go to war for her mother. I need to know everything. About your father, about what really happened. I need to know what kind of woman I am trying to save. Josie was quiet for a long moment. Then she lifted her shirt and turned around. Scars covered her back, old ones. White lines crisscrossing young skin. A map of violence written on a child's body. That kind of woman, Josie said quietly. The kind who stopped him from doing this ever again. Silas felt something crack inside him. All the carefully built walls around his heart, crumbling. Your father did this, when he drank, which was most of the time toward the end. And your mother, she tried to stop him. She tried for years, but he was bigger, stronger, and the law does not care what a man does to his own family. What happened the night he died? Josie lowered her shirt, turned to face him. He came home drunk, found me reading when I should have been doing chores. He took off his belt. Josie's voice was flat, empty. Started hitting me. Mama tried to pull him off. He turned on her, threw her against the wall, and then she grabbed the fireplace poker. Silence stretched between them. She saved my life, Josie said. If she had not stopped him, he would have killed me. I know it. She knows it. That is why we ran. That is why we have been running for 2 years. Victor knows. Uncle Victor saw the aftermath. He helped Mama cover it up. Then he started using it against her, said if she did not do what he wanted, he would tell everyone. What did he want? Everything. Josie's eyes were hard. Her, the land, us. He said we belonged to him now, that Mama was his property. Silas thought about the man who had just sat at his table, smiling, reasonable, patient, a monster wearing a gentleman's face. Tomorrow, he said, I'm going back to the canyon. I'm going to get your mother, and Uncle Victor will not be a problem. How can you be sure? Because I am done running, done hiding. Silas met her eyes. Your mother protected you. Now I am going to protect her. Why? Josie's voice cracked. Why would you do this? You do not know us. You do not owe us anything. Silas thought about the question, about all the reasons he could give. Because you knocked on my door. Because you trusted me with your sisters. Because your mother did what I wish I had been brave enough to do years ago. What is that? Fight back. Josie was quiet for the moment. Then she nodded. I am coming with you. No, she is my mother. And these are your siblings. They need you here. They need their mother more. Silas studied her face, saw the determination there. The same determination that had carried her through a blizzard with a dying baby in her arms. He knew that look. He had worn it himself once, a long time ago. Fine. But you do exactly what I say, when I say it. No arguments. No arguments. And if things go wrong, you run. You get back here. You protect your brothers and sisters. Understood. Understood. They stood there in the lamplight, man and girl. Both of them damaged. Both of them determined. Tomorrow, Silas said. We leave at dawn. He walked to the window, stared out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, Emmett Crane was waiting, and Victor Holloway was plotting. 2 enemies, 1 chance. The odds were not good. But Silas Thornton had stopped caring about odds a long time ago. All he cared about now was bringing a mother home to her children, whatever it took. They rode out before the sun cleared the mountains. Silas on a borrowed horse from his own stock. Josie on a mare that was too big for her but steady enough for the mountain trails. She had not complained, had not asked for a smaller mount, just climbed up and hung on. The girl had grit. Silas would give her that. They reached the mouth of Miller's Canyon as the first rays of sunlight touched the red rock walls. The world was painted in shades of gold and crimson. Beautiful. Deadly. Silas reined up, studied the terrain. Last time I came through the front. Crane was expecting that. This time we go around. Around. There is a passage, half-mile west, through the rock, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It leads to a ledge overlooking the cave. How do you know about it? I have been in this canyon before, long time ago, before I became what I am now. Josie absorbed this. What were you before? Silas did not answer immediately. A hunter, he said finally. A tracker of men. They left the horses in a hidden hollow, a crack in the rock that would shelter them from view. Silas tied them loosely. Easy enough to pull free if something spooked them. From here we climb. The passage was worse than Silas remembered. Narrow, dark, filled with loose rock that shifted under their feet. Josie scraped her hands raw against the stone, did not complain, just kept climbing. They emerged onto the ledge as the sun reached its peak. Below them, the cave opened like a mouth in the canyon wall. Silas pressed himself flat against the rock and peered over the edge. 4 men visible, sitting around a fire that had burned down to embers, playing cards, drinking, and there, against the far wall, Emmeline. She sat with her hands in front of her, not bound, or at least not visibly. Her dark hair hung around her face. She looked thin, tired, but alive. That is Mama. Josie's voice cracked. Silas nodded. Where is Crane? The question had barely left his lips when the answer appeared. Emmett Crane emerged from somewhere deeper in the cave. He paced toward the entrance, stopped, looked out at the canyon like he was waiting for something. He knows we are coming, Silas muttered. Then why are we here? Because he does not know about this ledge. Silas studied the layout. 4 men plus Crane. The entrance was the only visible way in or out. But there was another way. A narrow passage at the back of the cave that led deeper into the rock. Here is the plan, Silas said quietly. I go down, draw their fire. When the shooting starts, you stay up here. Watch the entrance. Anyone tries to flank me, you put a bullet in them. Josie's face went pale. I have never shot anyone before. Hopefully you will not have to today. She nodded, but her hands were shaking as she checked her revolver. Josie, look at me. She did. Your mother is down there. She needs you to be strong. Can you do that? I can do that. Silas believed her. He began to climb down. The descent was treacherous. Loose rock threatened to give way with every step. One slip would send him tumbling into the camp below, alerting everyone. He moved slowly, carefully, using every shadow for cover. He reached the canyon floor without incident, pressed himself against the rock wall, edged toward the cave entrance. 20 feet, 15, 10. One of the men looked up from his cards, frowned. Hey, did you hear something? Silas stepped out of the shadows, rifle raised. Everyone freeze. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then all hell broke loose. The nearest man went for his pistol. Silas shot him in the chest. He went down hard. The others scattered, diving for cover, reaching for weapons. Silas fired again. Again, picking off targets, using the rock wall at his back to prevent flanking. A bullet whined past his ear. Another kicked up dust at his feet. From behind him, the way he had come. He spun. A man was climbing down from somewhere. Rifle aimed at Silas's back. A shot rang out from above. The man jerked, staggered, fell. Josie? No time to think about it. Silas turned back to the cave, 2 men down, 2 still fighting, and Crane had disappeared. Where was Emmeline? Then he saw her. She was not cowering against the wall. She was moving, crossing the cave in a crouch. a pistol in her hands. Where had she gotten a pistol? One of the remaining men saw her too, swung his rifle toward her. Emmeline shot first. The man crumpled. That left one. The last man ran, bolted for the cave entrance. Silas let him go. He moved into the cave, scanning for threats. The air was thick with gunpowder smoke. Emmeline. She spun, pistol raised, eyes wild. Then she saw him. Really saw him. You came. Your daughter is very persuasive. Something like a laugh escaped her, or maybe a sob. Hard to tell. How touching. Crane's voice came from the shadows. He stepped out of the darkness at the back of the cave, rifle aimed at Emmeline. Drop it, Thornton, or I put a bullet in her chest. Silas lowered his rifle, slowly. Let her go, Emmett. This is between us. It has always been between us. Crane's finger tightened on the trigger. But I want you to watch. I want you to see what happens when you cannot save someone. Again. Emmeline moved. She did not run away from Crane. She ran toward him, inside his rifle's range before he could adjust his aim. Her hand closed on his wounded arm. He was bleeding. Someone had hit him during the firefight. She twisted. Crane screamed. The rifle fired wild, shattering rock. Emmeline slammed her forehead into his nose, ripped the weapon from his hands. She leveled it at his chest. Do not. Silas started. Give me one reason. Emmeline's voice was ice. One reason I should not. Crane laughed through the blood streaming from his nose. Because I am the only one who can clear your name. I know what you did to your husband. I have proof. Kill me, and that proof goes to every sheriff in the territory. Emmeline hesitated. He's lying, Silas said. He does not care about your husband. He cares about hurting me. Does it matter? Crane spat. Either way, she is a killer. Just like you. Just like me. We are all the same, Thornton. The only difference is I am honest about it. Emmeline looked at Silas. Silas looked at Emmeline. Something passed between them, an understanding that did not need words. Emmeline lowered the rifle. No, she said. I am not like you, and neither is he. Crane's hand moved, going for a pistol hidden at his back. Silas saw it, started to raise his rifle, but he was not fast enough. A shot rang out from above. Crane jerked, staggered, fell. He lay in the dirt staring up at the cave ceiling, blood pooling beneath him. Killed by a child. He whispered, how fitting. He died without another word. Silas looked up. Josie stood on the ledge above, revolver still smoking in her hands. Her face was white as the snow outside. Silas. He turned at Emmeline's voice. She was looking at him, really looking, like she was seeing him for the first time. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. We still have to get out of here. They made their way out of the canyon. Emmeline, leaning on Silas. All of them covered in blood and dust. They found the horses where Silas had left them. All except Copper. Silas's horse lay on his side, breathing in shallow gasps. Blood soaked the snow beneath him. One of Crane's men. A parting shot. Silas knelt beside his horse, his companion, his only friend for 5 years. Copper's eye rolled toward him, already glazing. I am sorry, old friend. He pulled his revolver. One shot. Quick. Merciful. When he stood, tears were streaming down his face. The first tears he had cried in 5 years. Josie appeared at his side. Her small hand found his. I am sorry about your horse. I am sorry you had to shoot a man. She was quiet for a moment. I did not want to, but I had to. I know. Is that what it is like? Killing. It feels empty. Silas looked at this girl, 12 years old, blood on her hands for the first time. It should feel empty. The moment it does not. That is when you have lost yourself. They walked out of the canyon on foot, leading Crane's horses. Behind them, Copper's body lay still in the snow. Silas did not look back. He could not. But he kept hold of Josie's hand, and she kept hold of his. Two killers, walking toward home, whatever that meant now. They reached the ranch as the sun was setting. The children poured out of the house, Violet screaming "Mama" at the top of her lungs, Rose running for the first time in months, Sam hanging back with that uncertain expression. Baby Lily wailed in the arms of Sheriff Barkley. Josie had sent him, Silas realized, before they left. Smart girl. Emmeline collapsed into her children. They piled on top of her, a heap of tears and relief and desperate clutching hands. Silas stood apart, watching, not belonging. But Emmeline looked up at him over the heads of her children and mouthed two words: "Thank you." The reunion was cut short the next morning. Victor Holloway arrived with a deputy from Coldwater Springs, demanding custody of the children. "These children's mother is a murderer," he announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "She killed my brother Thomas in cold blood. I have evidence to prove it." Sheriff Barkley frowned. "That is a serious accusation, Mr. Holloway. I have witnesses. I have physical evidence. I have. You have nothing." Emmeline's voice cut through his bluster. She stood in the doorway of Silas's house, pale but steady. "You have threats and blackmail and lies, Victor. That is all you have ever had." Victor's face twisted. "You murdered my brother. I defended my daughter." The air went very still. Emmeline stepped forward. Her eyes never left Victor's face. "Thomas came home drunk, like he did most nights. He found Josie reading instead of doing her chores. He beat her with his belt until the buckles split her skin. When I tried to stop him, he turned on me." Victor's jaw tightened. "That is not what happened." "Then tell them what did happen, Victor. Tell them how you stood in the doorway and watched while your brother beat a 12-year-old girl. Tell them how you helped me cover it up. Tell them how you have been using that against me ever since." Sheriff Barkley turned to Victor. "Is this true, Mr. Holloway?" "She is lying. Am I?" Josie stepped forward. She turned around, lifted her shirt. The scars on her back were visible even from across the room, white lines crisscrossing young skin. A map of violence. "Papa did this." Josie's voice was flat. "When he drank, which was most of the time." Sam made a strangled sound. "That is not true." His voice cracked. "Papa was not like that." "Papa loved us. Papa loved us when he was himself," Josie said quietly. "But he was not himself very often, Sam. Not at the end. You are lying. Both of you are lying." He ran, out the door across the yard toward the barn. Silas followed. He found the boy in the hayloft, sobbing. Silas climbed up and sat beside him, said nothing. After a long while, Sam spoke. "Did you know what Papa was really like?" "I only know what your sister told me, and what I saw on her back." Sam flinched. "She showed you. She showed me." More silence. "I do not remember him being mean. I only remember him teaching me to fish, telling me stories, carrying me on his shoulders." "Both can be true," Silas said carefully. "People are complicated. Your papa could have loved you and still hurt your sister. That does not make the love less real. It just means he was broken in ways you were too young to see." "Then why did Mama not just leave? Why did she have to?" "I do not know. I was not there." Silas paused. "But I know your Mama loves you more than anything in this world. I know she has been running for 2 years trying to keep you safe. And I know she has done things she is not proud of, because sometimes that is what it takes to protect the people you love." Sam looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Have you done things you are not proud of?" "Yes. Bad things. Very bad things. But you are not a bad person." Silas considered this. "I do not know what I am, but I'm trying to be better. Every day I am trying." Sam did not respond for a long time. Then he climbed down from the hayloft and walked back to the house. At the door he paused, looked back at Silas. You are going to stay right. You are not going to leave us. I am not going anywhere. Sam nodded once, then went inside. When Silas returned to the front porch, Sheriff Barkley had Victor in handcuffs. Mr. Holloway, it is my understanding that you have known about your brother's death for 2 years, that you helped conceal it, that you have been using that knowledge to threaten and extort your sister-in-law. Victor's face had gone pale. I was trying to protect my family. You were trying to steal a widow's land and children. Barkley's voice was iron. Now Mrs. Holloway's actions are a matter for the territorial judge to consider. But your actions, Mr. Holloway, are criminal, extortion, blackmail, conspiracy after the fact. You cannot. I can. And I am. Barkley pulled out handcuffs. Victor Holloway, you are under arrest. You will be held in the Coldwater Springs jail until the circuit judge arrives. Victor was led away, shouting threats that no one listened to. The children watched from the window. Emmeline stood beside Silas, trembling. What happens now? She asked. The judge. If he decides I am guilty, he will not. You do not know that. I know that 5 children need their mother. I know that every person in this room would testify to what Thomas was. I know that any judge worth his salt will call it what it was. A woman defending her child. He took her hand. And I know I will be here, whatever happens. I will be here. Emmeline looked at him. At this man who had walked into a canyon full of killers for her, who had taken in her children without question, who was offering her something she had not had in years. Safety. Why? She whispered. Why would you do all this? Silas thought about the question. Because I know what it is to lose everything. Because I know what it is to carry guilt that does not belong to you. Because your daughter knocked on my door and trusted me with her sisters. He paused. And because I think maybe we can help each other. 2 broken people, putting the pieces back together. Emmeline's eyes filled with tears. I killed a man. So did I. So did Josie. He squeezed her hand. We have all done things we cannot undo. The question is what we do next. She leaned into him. Just slightly. Just enough. For the first time in years, Silas did not pull away. The circuit judge arrived 6 weeks later. 6 weeks of waiting. Of wondering. Of pretending everything was normal while the shadow of the law hung over them. The children had settled into a rhythm. Sam still struggled with the truth about his father, but he was talking again. Working alongside Silas in the barn, learning to care for the horses. Josie had taken over the household with frightening efficiency. Cooking, cleaning, making sure everyone was where they needed to be. She still had nightmares. Silas heard her crying sometimes in the dark, but she never spoke of it and he did not push. Violet talked constantly about the barn cat she had named Snowball despite its being orange, about the chickens, about everything and nothing. Rose had started speaking again, quietly, hesitantly, but her words were coming back. She told stories now, made-up ones about cowboys and princesses and horses that could fly, and Lily. Little Lily, who had almost died in the snow. She was walking, running, really, getting into everything. She called Silas Da, and nothing anyone did could stop her. Emmeline watched it all with wonder in her eyes. They act like they belong here, she said one evening. Like this is home, is it not? She looked at him. This man who had become her anchor in the storm. I do not know anymore. Every place we have stayed, every town we have passed through, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Victor to find us, for everything to fall apart. Victor is not going to bother you anymore, but the judge. The judge will do what is right. How can you be so sure? Because I have to be. Silas took her hand. Because I refuse to believe that a woman who did what you did, who protected her child the only way she could, deserves anything but gratitude. The trial was held in the Coldwater Springs courthouse. A small room with wooden benches and a judge's bench that had seen better days. Judge Marcus Wheeler presided, An older man with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. Emmeline told her story, simply, without dramatics. The years of abuse, the escalating violence, the night Thomas came home drunk and nearly killed Josie. Josie testified, showed her scars, described what her father had done in a voice that did not waver. The doctor from their old town sent a written statement, describing the injuries he had treated over the years, the broken bones, the bruises, the careful lies Emmeline had told to explain them. And then it was Victor's turn. He sat in chains, his fine clothes rumpled, his handsome face twisted with rage. "She murdered my brother in cold blood," he snarled. "She is a killer, a monster. She, Mr. Holloway." Judge Wheeler's voice was ice. "I have read the evidence. I have heard the testimony. What I have not heard is a single word of concern for the child who was beaten within an inch of her life." Victor's mouth opened, closed. "What I have heard is a pattern of extortion and blackmail that spans 2 years. What I have heard is a man more concerned with property than with people." The judge turned to Emmeline. "Mrs. Holloway, you killed your husband." "Yes, Your Honor. Do you regret it?" Emmeline was silent for a long moment. "I regret that it came to that. I regret that I could not find another way. I regret that my children had to witness what they witnessed." She lifted her chin. "But I do not regret protecting my daughter. I would do it again if I had to." Judge Wheeler nodded slowly. "The law recognizes the right of self-defense and the right to defend another person from imminent harm, based on the evidence presented, based on the testimony of witnesses. I find that Mrs. Holloway acted in defense of her child." He banged his gavel. No charges filed. The courtroom erupted. Violet cheered. Rose burst into tears. Sam stood frozen like he could not believe what he was hearing. Josie crossed the room and threw her arms around her mother. "It is over," she sobbed. "It is really over." Emmeline held her daughter tight, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, baby, it is over." Victor Holloway was not so fortunate. For the crimes of extortion, conspiracy after the fact, and attempted kidnapping, I sentence you to 5 years hard labor in the Wyoming Territorial Prison. Victor screamed threats as they dragged him away, promised revenge, swore he would make them all pay. No one listened. When the courthouse emptied, Silas found Emmeline standing on the steps, looking out at the town like she was seeing it for the first time. "How do you feel?" "I do not know." She laughed, a broken sound. "I have been running so long I do not know how to stop." "Then maybe it is time to learn." She turned to look at him. "What happens now? Whatever you want. You can stay. You can go. I will help you either way. What do you want?" Silas thought about the question, about his empty house, his lonely years, the graves behind the barn that he visited every morning. "I want you to stay. All of you. I want to wake up to the sound of children running through the house. I want to eat meals at a crowded table. I want to remember what it feels like to have a family." Emmeline's breath caught. "Is that a proposal?" "It is an offer. No strings attached, no expectations. And if I say yes, then we figure it out together, one day at a time." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she took his hand. "One day at a time." They walked back to the ranch together, their children running ahead, their future uncertain but possible. One day at a time. Spring came slowly to Wyoming. The snow melted in patches at first, revealing brown grass and frozen mud. Then the sun grew stronger, the days grew longer, and the land began to wake from its winter sleep. Silas stood at Eleanor and Hannah's graves, a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. Emmeline stood beside him. "This is Emmeline," he said to the headstones. "I have told you about her children." He paused, gathered his words. "I am not replacing you. No one could ever replace you. But I think you would want me to be happy. I think you would want me to live." Emmeline placed her own flowers on the graves. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for loving him first, for making him the man he is." They stood there in silence for a while. The wind rustled through the grass. The creek burbled in the distance. The same creek where Eleanor had walked to her death. The same creek where Emmeline's shoes had been found. Water and death and life, all flowing together. The wedding was a small affair. Pastor Reynolds from Coldwater Springs officiated. The whole town attended. They packed into the little church until there was standing room only. Emmeline wore a blue dress, simple but beautiful. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Silas wore his good suit, the same one he had worn to Eleanor's funeral. It felt different now. "Do you, Silas Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" "I do. And do you, Emmeline Holloway, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" Emmeline looked at Silas, at this man who had saved her, who had given her children a home, who was offering her a future she had never dared to hope for. "I do. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming and by Almighty God, I pronounce you husband and wife." He smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Silas pulled Emmeline close, kissed her. The church erupted in cheers. Violet jumped up and down, scattering the rest of her flowers. Rose laughed out loud, a sound that still surprised everyone who heard it. Sam clapped his hands, and Lily let out a happy shriek and threw her bonnet into the air. The reception was held at the ranch. Tables loaded with food, music from a fiddle and guitar, dancing under the stars. Silas danced with Emmeline, with Josie, with Violet, who insisted on standing on his boots while he moved. He even danced with Rose, who was too shy to lead, but happy to be spun in circles until she was dizzy and laughing. Sam did not dance. He stood at the edge, watching. But he was smiling. That was enough. Late that night, Silas found himself on the porch, looking out at the land that had been his prison for 5 years. That had become his paradise in the space of one winter. Emmeline joined him. Regrets, not a single one. Fears. Only that I will wake up and find this was all a dream. It is not a dream. She took his hand. It is real. I am real. The children are real. This life is real. I know. I just have to remind myself sometimes, after so many years of nothing, having everything feels impossible. Get used to it. She leaned into him. Because I am not going anywhere. None of us are. They stood there until the stars wheeled overhead, until the moon rose silver and full. They did not need to talk, did not need to fill the silence with words. They just needed to be together. That was enough. 6 months later. Morning. Silas woke before dawn, as he always did, slipped out of bed without waking Emmeline, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. He started the coffee, watched the sky lighten through the window, listened to the sounds of a house full of sleeping children, sounds he thought he would never hear again. Then he walked to the front door, and stopped. By the door in a neat row sat the family's shoes. Silas's worn boots, Emmeline's leather shoes, the same ones Josie had found by the creek, now mended and polished. Sam's boots, too big for him, bought to grow. Josie's riding boots, mud-caked and well-used. She had a horse of her own now, a black mare with a white star on her forehead. She had named her Copper, after the horse that died. Silas had cried when she told him. Violet's little shoes with the scuffed toes. Rose's shoes embroidered with tiny flowers she had added herself. Lily's impossibly small boots. More decoration than function. 7 pairs of shoes, where once there was one. Silas stared at them for a long moment, his throat tight. Behind him, Emmeline's voice. "Coffee is getting cold." He did not turn around. Could not yet. "I know." She came to stand beside him, saw what he was looking at, understood. "We are home," she said softly. "All of us." Silas nodded. He thought about everything that had brought him to this moment. The grief and the loss, the years of emptiness, the blizzard and the children and the woman who had saved him as surely as he had saved her. Life was not perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when the grief crept back, still mornings when he woke expecting to find himself alone. But the good outweighed the bad. The joy outweighed the sorrow. And every morning he woke up grateful for the life he had been given. Sam appeared in the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Is breakfast ready?" "Soon." "Can I help?" "Set the table." Sam moved to the cabinet, started pulling out plates. 7 plates, where once there had been one. Josie came next, already dressed, ready to ride. "I am taking Copper to the creek," she announced. "I will be back for breakfast. Be careful." "I am always careful." She was out the door before he could respond. Silas watched her go. This girl who had become his daughter in every way that mattered. The others drifted in one by one, Violet chattering about a dream she had, Rose humming a song she had made up, Lily toddling towards Silas with her arms outstretched. "Da," he picked her up, held her close. "Good morning, little one." She grabbed his nose, laughed. Emmeline moved to the stove, started cooking. The smell of bacon filled the air. Silas stood in the middle of his kitchen, baby in his arms, wife at the stove, children all around him. Full. His house was full. His heart was full. His life was full. It had taken 5 years of emptiness to appreciate it. 5 years of silence and grief and waiting to die. But here he was, alive, surrounded by love. Josie had found her mother's shoes by the creek. But she had not found her mother. Instead, she had found him. And he had found something he thought he had lost forever. Home. Not a place, not a building, not 4 walls and a roof. Home was the people whose shoes sat beside yours at the end of the day. Home was the chaos of children and the quiet of shared silences. Home was forgiveness and second chances and the courage to keep trying. Silas Thornton had stopped killing 5 years ago. He had thought that meant stopping everything. Stopping life. Stopping hope. He had been wrong. Stopping killing had been the first step toward something else. Toward healing. Toward love. Toward this kitchen full of noise and warmth and life. Breakfast. Emmeline called. The children scrambled for seats, arguing about who got to sit where, fighting over the last biscuit, being a family. Silas took his place at the head of the table, Emmeline at the other end, their children between them, 7 people, where once there had been one. He looked around at their faces, at the life they had built from the ashes of their separate griefs, and he smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in 5 years. Home. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.